Well, I think we're here, but I don't hear any music. It's good to see you, Seed Sue.
Thank you.
Well, I guess we're just supposed to start without any musical introduction today. Anyhow, we can manage. Today is the winter solstice, and there's nothing more incredibly musical than the rhythm of the spheres, is there?
Yeah, very good. I've
And
often
hmm,
I've often thought that we should not have the new year start on January 1st, but we should have the new year end on the winter solstice. And so tomorrow should be the new year. Or in the alternative, the first day of spring should be the new year. But just to follow what I guess was decided by Julius Caesar or whoever did it, is not the way to go.
well, the history of the calendar's very interested and complicated thing. Today is possibly in terms of comparative religion, comparative mythology of ancient peoples, this was the most terrifying day in the Northern Hemisphere because this was the shortest day, and the question was, would the sun ever return? Because if it didn't, they were all in, as Daddy Bush would say, deep doo doo. And I mean, you look at the number of monuments around the world. Well, not around the world, the number of monuments in Europe, in particular, that are specifically dedicated to the winter solstice and to the redemption of the world from ice. Uh, and today is an interesting day in just so many ways, and uh, one of them is that today is the 403rd anniversary of the Pilgrims disembarking on Plymouth Rock.
Okay. But to go back with the winter solstice issue, have there been any well-known holidays on this date or celebration days? I don't know if what one is called. I know that there's various pagan worship days, like Easter was one, and some of the others. But was there one for this particular day?
The people of Northern Europe always, performed sacrifices, or I mean, this was the original Yule, basically.
Oh, I see. Okay.
This moment was the original Yule, and the Celts. The Celts actually had their, and I see. I don't know, and it's interesting. I don't know of a single religion worldwide that actually used this as a New Year's Day. The Celts used Halloween as their New Year's Day, which is halfway between the equinox and the solstice. The Samhain was the Celtic New Year, and the Romans actually, under Julius Caesar, they actually started their New Year in March, but it was March 1st. And I don't know exactly how that happened. It was 21 days before the spring equinox.
Well,
And
I'm not saying that the first day of the year should be today. I'm saying it should be tomorrow. This should be the last day of the year because it's the shortest day. And then tomorrow should be the first day of the new year because it starts getting longer from tomorrow on. And then another issue that I'm thinking about, why in the heck do we have 28 days in February and 31 days in July? And why do we have 12 months and 7 days of the week? I think we should adjust a lot of those. I guess 7 days of the week is okay. But I certainly don't like 12 months and being, 28, 29, 30, and 31 days in the
well, now
month.
come on, I'm sure you know what basically why there are seven planets. The seven planets are the visible to the eye, were the origin of the 7 days of the week. That's basically the seven ruling gods of the ancient world. 52 weeks. That's the solar year is is not divisible by anything even at all. Uh, I mean, you could have, I guess, 5 day weeks, but the
I know
ancient
I can accept 52 weeks, I can accept 7 days, but why this mess with the different days of the month? Why can't you have them all uniform, or more uniform than they are? Why 12 months? Why not, I don't know,
well, I mean, that's
10
because of the
months,
moon. The word month is related to the word moon. You know that, and it's uh, it's um, it's
30
basically
days?
it's a compromise. I mean, it was a bit of a hatchet job, but if you want to see, I mean, I've studied the Maya calendar, the Aztec calendar, the Mesopotamian calendar, and they're all basically compromises between the solar and lunar years. The lunar year, the Muslims, have and the Hebrews, for that matter, have a series of basically 28 or 29 day months that correspond to the moons.
Well, isn't
Uh,
that it, in the Chinese year based on that also?
Now that's one I've never studied. You're
Okay,
more of an expert in the Far East than I am.
okay.
What do they do in Japan?
They follow what we do here, except that they number their years after the life of an emperor, as opposed to the death of, or I guess, the birth of Jesus Christ. But I mean, they still use the Western time, but I have to convert it a lot, because a lot of time I'll get it not in the Western year, but I'll get it in basically by the birth of the emperor. And that's really a cumbersome system, because you have a new emperor every few years, and if you got to keep changing the eras, you can't keep track of them very well. So it's much easier to think, just count consecutively to 2024 than Showa is 52 years and Taisei is 13 years, whatever it is.
I guess that's why even in this atheist age we have abandoned. I think we were talking about Anno Domini a couple of weeks ago in on another podcast, and even those who don't want to hear anything as uh, you know nauseatingly Christian as Anno Domini, they've preserved the calendar as they call it the Common Era now,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
CE.
BCE and Common
CE.
Era. See, yeah, I know. I have in my church, some of the more progressive members, when they talk about the old times, they won't say AD or BC, they'll use the Common Era gobbledygook. But
One of the most interesting calendars, of course. Are you familiar with the French Revolutionary calendar?
no, but there was one of the calendars back there. Did we lose it like 15 days in a year? Was that when they converted to the
That
Julian
was
calendar from
yeah,
the
no,
Augustan calendar?
from Julian to Gregorian
Okay.
in the either I believe the 1730s or
Yeah.
1740s, right around the time George Washington was born, because his birth is always listed in traditional documents as OS, Old Style, uh, before the transformation of the calendar. But
But that's unrelated to the revolutionary one you're talking about.
oh, totally, totally, totally. No, the the transformation from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar is where England lost its 17 days or whatever it was, and you know, uh, I've actually been keeping up with the years on which different countries converted, and basically Pope Gregory, I guess, was in the mid 16th century, and the most devout Catholic countries converted right away, and then it slowly but surely spread up to northern Protestant Europe, and
Do you know
England was
why
the
the
last one
conversion was done?
to make the calendar more accurate, to account for the fact that there are not actually 365 days in the rotation of the sun. It's some incredibly uh, weird fraction like 3.365.2426, and it goes on from there. And basically, over time, you lose days.
Oh, so they
If
didn't have leap year in the old Julian calendar, I
Oh, sure
guess.
they did. Sure they did. But even so, you lose, and you have to. You see the reason you have to. Did you notice, for example, that in the year 2000, which would have been a leap year otherwise, there was no leap year.
Oh, was that because, oh, that's interesting. No, I didn't know that.
You
But
had
I,
you had they had you have to over to recompensate every 100 years for the error that inserting February 29th causes, and there's just the French Revolutionary calendar. They tried to get rid of the 7 day week, by the way, and they tried to have um, standardized 30-day months, but they were still stuck with basically five sometimes called intercalary dates, and if that calendar had survived, they 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 might have had. I don't know how they. I actually don't know how they handled leap years. I can't remember, but I don't know if you saw the new movie Napoleon or not. But they didn't even mention the 18 Brumaire. Brumaire was a fall month in the French Revolutionary calendar, and that was the day he seized power. And I always said to all three people in the world who understood that I had expected January 6th to be Donald Trump's 18 Brumaire.
very good. It still may be. But you mentioned that in the year 2000 they didn't have a leap year, but that calls mind the frenzy over the Y2K issue. And we thought that the whole nation would shut down, the world would shut down because the computers couldn't handle that switchover. Do you remember that issue?
Oh, I sure do.
Did you
I
have any
sure.
did you have any problems?
Nor
I
did I.
did.
You really?
I did, yes. At that time, Google hadn't come out with the Google Translate for all these languages, so I had to have a dedicated computer having Japanese. And when the new year came up, all of my files disappeared
Oh my
and I
God.
couldn't find them, couldn't find them. Then I found out that they reversed the dates and they went back. I had to search. It probably cost me 30 minutes of my time to be able to locate those files because they disappeared. So everyone was saying that it was going to be big calamity, but it was a little issue, and I had to search to find them. So I could see how the concern was there because if my little computer had that kind of a problem, that there could have been bigger problems. But I think that there were no problems really.
Not major. I mean, basically, it was just a matter of programming uh, two digits on the date, and
Yeah.
most people can handle computers can do that. But tell me, how did you find them? Did you have to go back to 1901 or something? I mean, how did you find
No, I had
your
I had to
files?
call up somebody and he had to search and find them. And
And
then
where were they hidden?
they went in reverse or something. I can't remember how they were organized, but they all went into a different um, location, and I just come in and they had to search and they'd find them, and they were in reverse order or something. Something was messed up, but it was solved. And so I thought, well, I'll be able to tell my grandkids that I suffered under Y2K.
I don't know. If a 30-minute delay is the worst suffering you've had a very easy life.
Okay.
It's interesting, but you might actually be the first person I know with a personal tale of trouble from Y2K 23 years later.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyhow, back to the more general subject of the podcast, which is how to preserve America. The landing on Plymouth Rock was definitely something that in our childhood uh, was really considered one of the founding events of white America.
And when was that? Like 1626 or something?
1620. 1620.
1620? Okay.
403 years to the day.
Okay. Okay.
But of course, that was old style. That was old style. That
Yeah.
was so it might. I mean, if you adjust for the calendrical change, who knows what it would be? But I'm not going to worry about it.
Well, it seems sad that they arrive in New England at the end of December. You think that they could have planned better, but maybe I guess they had to leave because of religious persecution. Some I don't know, but they should not have come in December, 21st.
Well, I was looking at the list of passengers on the Mayflower, and uh, uh, that first winter was very hard. I mean, they lost some children that year and some adults too. But
Yeah.
there's one happy story, and I think it's kind of interesting to think about. I had never before heard of Peregrine White. You ever heard of Peregrine White before?
No, I've heard of Peregrine Falcon. He's quite famous.
I think he's a little bit
Okay.
different.
All
But
right.
Peregrine White was a, a was an in utero passenger on the Mayflower, and
Not like
he
Virginia Dare, I guess. Not unlike Virginia Dare.
very much like him. He was the first uh, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant to be born in Massachusetts, and he had a very successful life. he had he had five children. He was born uh, while the ship was anchored, and he lived to be 84 years old in 1704.
Oh,
And he also has the distinction of being the only uh, the only passenger on the Mayflower whose obituary was recorded in a newspaper.
wow.
But if you
Was
if you
that
think
Ben
of
Franklin's newspaper?
no, it was called the let's see what was it called here, called the Massachusetts uh, no, the Boston Newsletter.
Okay.
I've never heard of it. It must be one of these sort of very rare publications. But he died on July 20th of 1704, and he let's see, I'll just read the obituary because it's kind of interesting. Marshfield, Massachusetts, July 26th. Captain Peregrine White of this town, aged 84 years and 8 months, died on the 20th instant. He was vigorous and of comely aspect to the last. He was the son of Mr. William White and Susanna, his wife, born on board the Mayflower, Captain Jones, commander, in Cape Cod Harbor, November 1620, was the first Englishman born in New England. Although he was in the former part of his life extravagant, yet much reformed in his last years, and he died hopefully.
So I guess that's a euphemism. Extravagant and hopeful means that he was debauched and he repented just before he died. That's what I read into that.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, what a good life for a pilgrim to have. And think of those 84 years from 1620 to 1704, and just the fact that there were no newspapers anywhere in the world in 1620, but that
But I
this
do want to rehabilitate his reputation a little bit because back then among the Puritans, debauched means that he probably read the Bible only 1 hour on Sunday as opposed to 7 hours. So he was, that was a really strict environment back then. So he might have been a pretty good guy.
I suspect he was. He was married only once and had five children, and it's just really amazing to think of a lifetime. Uh, I mean, he outlived his life expectancy. People were not expected to live 84 years in 1620. The life expectancy for Englishmen was probably around 47 or at most 50 years at that point, and he totally beat the odds. Maybe moving to the New World had something to do with it. Maybe there was better food supply, better supply of protein, anyhow, in the form of deer to be hunted.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I do remember reading from the Bible, was it Proverbs or somewhere? It says that the age of man is 60 and 10 years. And if you are hale, it may be fourscore. So yeah, he outlived the biblical age of man by quite a few years, and even for a hale man of 80,
Well,
80 years old.
I've always wondered about that three score and ten because, from the archaeological standpoint, digging up people's bones, uh, you find very few people other than royalty really who lived that long. So they were being optimistic.
Well, not as optimistic as when they wrote down how long Methuselah lived. You know, they really stretched that out.
Oh, who knows? What was he? 900 and
Something.
uh,
All of them back then supposedly lived that a long time, and that's neither here nor there. But so he, in any event, um, they you might not know this, but they came to Plymouth Rock. And was Jamestown before that or after
Oh
that?
yes, the Jamestown was 13 or 14 years. Jamestown was 1607, I believe. It might have been the plan was, I guess, launched in 1606. The Virginia Company, it was called. But
Because
no, yeah,
my because
Virginia
my
was.
ancestor James Pace came over and he lived in Jamestown. And when we went to Jamestown, there was a coloring book that was for sale that talked about my ancestor James Pace because he befriended a little Indian boy, and the Indian boy said, "Hey, watch out! There's going to be a massacre," and so he warned all the people, and they made a comic book about it or a coloring book about it. But I don't. I thought wasn't Jamestown destroyed, or was that something else?
No, it wasn't exactly destroyed. It was abandoned in favor of Williamsburg.
Oh, what was that? There was one town that was completely destroyed. They couldn't find it. Um, I can't remember what that was. Roanoke was that?
Roanoke, yeah, the very first Sir Walter Raleigh's
Yeah,
colony. Yeah, Sir
yeah.
Walter Raleigh's. That was 20 years earlier in the 1580s. That was where Virginia Dare was born.
Okay.
Uh, and yeah, Roanoke pretty much disappeared without much of a trace. I mean, there are a few traces of it, and there are all sorts of. Do you know that there was a group of people discovered in the 1620s who were living in what is now North Carolina, and they claimed to be they intermarried with Indians, of course, but they claimed to be the descendants of the Roanoke colonists.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. No.
It's very interesting, but there's a lot written on the lost colony. But no, Jamestown is an archaeological site, and you can visit it today. Not much stayed standing all these years. There was a battle there during the Civil War, among other things. And it's but so what did Mr. Pace do other than that one story?
Well, I mean, he was a farmer, and he just he was just whatever. Weren't they all farmers back then? I don't know. And then he died, and they descended on, and then my I guess I wrote the Pace book, and I named it after my great grandfather, James Orlando Pace, and he was the descendant of this Richard Pace guy.
You mean the Pace Amendment you're talking
Pace
about?
Amendment, yeah, the Pace Amendment was written by James O. Pace, which was my pseudonym, and I just basically looked at my ancestors, and then I read their genealogy. I thought, who was the best of my ancestors, And his obituary, it was glowing. He didn't lead a life like what was it like Peregrine White did? He led where they said they changed it. He lived a good life his whole life. So I thought, okay, I'll use that name. So I picked that name and wrote the book on it.
And how long did he live?
Oh, that's why he was probably such a good guy. A horse crushed him, and so he died. He died, I think, in his 40s. So he didn't get a chance to to go through the, what is it called, the midlife crisis.
Well, there's certainly some advantages to that, uh, but anyhow, I mean, how far we have changed in this world. Mr. Peregrine White apparently joined. You're right. He basically started repenting right before he died. He only joined the Marshfield Church uh, late in life on 22nd May 1696 at the age of 78.
Well, you have in law a deathbed confession and deathbed related. They're admitted into court as having stronger weight because they think if someone is about to die, they are really concerned with the afterlife. And I think maybe that's a law or a custom that is not so relevant today because I don't think so many people are dying with the view what's going to happen in the next life. I think they'll lie to the very end. And so I don't know if there should be given less weight to a deathbed confession nowadays
I'd say that these days most people die so heavily sedated
yeah.
that any statement they make is actually subject to even more suspicion than average.
Yeah, that's probably true.
That I mean, there are a lot of it's fascinating to think about things exactly like that. I mean, uh, for some reason, I was thinking about King Harold, the last Anglo-Saxon king, the other day, and uh, what an incredibly painful death he must have had when he was shot in the eye at the Battle of Hastings, and of course it killed him. But given that, it probably didn't kill him instantly.
So he was well, I thought like Ethelred the Unready was the king that was doing that, but was that a different era?
No, Ethelred was way before Harold. Harold was the successor of Edward the Confessor.
Okay, I
Uh,
thought Ethelred the Unready was unready because William the Conqueror came in and beat him up. So maybe I'm a few hundred years off on that.
I'm afraid you'll get very low marks in English history for that answer.
Okay. Uh,
Very low marks, Mr. Johnson. Shame, shame, shame. You need to read your Domesday book.
oh, that's right. Yeah. But that's mostly just like who owned what property, right?
But it contained a lot of history of who was doing what,
Uh-huh.
and how that property came to be where it was. I mean, it's one of the major sources of lifestyle information of England in the 11th century. But all of this is, I guess, just a good way of saying that the solstice, the shortest day of the year, is a good time to reflect on time and the passage of time and what is our legacy going to be? I mean, are are you and I think you and I are basically at this point, we're targeted for complete erasure in history. They will do everything they can to forget that people like us ever existed.
Well, I think that there will be a remnant, and I think that we will rebound. I hope. I think that there will be enough of us that are opposed to miscegenation that our legacy will continue on. But I think regardless of how small we get or how rejuvenated we are, I do believe that we are living in an era that is going to be marked as a historical significant place. Like, I mean, if you look back at the previous centuries or decades, you have the gay 90s, you have the roaring 20s. Those are two decades that stand out and they still stand out today. And then I'm sure that there's other decades, but a lot of the decades just blend in together. But I believe that the Trump era is really going to be considered a key era for all of the problems and issues that's occurred. And I'm not sure what type of designation they're going to give to it. It won't be the roaring, it won't be gay. It might be, who
It could
knows,
very
the,
well be gay. What are you talking
yeah,
about?
Well, I think it probably more be, it depends on who wins in the end. It'll be the era of, of insurrection or the era of patriotic revival. I don't know what they're going to call it, but regardless of what it's called in the future, it is an epic that we are living in right now, and it will continue as long as Donald Trump. And who'd have thought that that New York braggadocio would have an era named for him? But as long as Donald Trump is rolling up his sleeves and fighting to the end, it's going to be an era that's going to be remembered.
You think we're going to have a Trumpian era like the Jeffersonian and Jacksonian eras?
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Well, yeah, only it might be less less palatable to the average person. But yeah, I think how did you call that? Trumponian? Trumpian?
Trumpian, I just said.
Trumpian, yeah. I think this is a Trumpian era. That's what I'm going to start using because we live in a Trumpian era. That's for sure.
Well, give credit when you do. I mean,
Okay, yeah,
I,
will do.
I claim an implied copyright on that.
All right.
But anyhow, the speaking of the era, I mean, when you first started talking about this era, I thought you were going to say that the key, the technological miracle of the 21st century is what you and I are doing right now.
Yeah.
Having a face-to-face conversation between downtown Los Angeles and uptown New Orleans. That is, the world has finally basically shrunk to nothing. And that of course is, it took the entirety of Peregrine White's life to get from the era of the King James Bible to the era of the first newspapers.
Yeah.
And that was his lifetime transformation. But in regard to Trump and the insurrection, what do you think of what happened in Colorado on Tuesday?
Well, I think that the appointment of prosecutors, judges, district attorneys, all on the basis of trying to promote diversity, has resulted in one of the last protections that we have against tyranny, corruption, and just unfair and unlawful behavior, because you have partisan in the people in the judiciary, both the judges, prosecutors, and just officers of the court that are not following what would traditionally be followed if it were an Anglo-Saxon run institution. I believe that even though I think these Colorado jurists were white, I think, but I think that they were seeking to find an answer, that justification for their decision, as opposed to ruling what should occur. I am not so confident that the Supreme Court will take any different approach, because look who's the Supreme Court is made of. So I don't know. And people are saying on the right and the Republicans, whatever, oh, that the U.S. Supreme Court will hear the case and decide that Colorado was wrong. I'm not so confident.
Well, I think you know that back in December of 2020, I was part of a team that submitted an amicus in favor of the original complaint of the state of Texas to overturn the election. It was called Texas versus Pennsylvania.
Now you be careful, because Rudy Giuliani just cost himself $150 million for saying some similar things. So you don't want to lose all of your vast wealth.
Well, no comment. No comment. But what happened to Rudy Giuliani is truly astounding. But he declared bankruptcy today, and I imagine that will be an easier solution than trying to get it overturned in the
But still, it won't be discharged in bankruptcy, and so his $10 million.
Why wouldn't I think it would be dischargeable in bankruptcy, because it's not said that it's a fraud, is it?
Oh, I thought it was willful and fraudulent. And maybe it's not fraud. I thought that, okay, maybe it would be discharged. But however, even if it is discharged or if it's not discharged, he has tangible assets and it can be used to satisfy a portion of it. So instead of his assets going to his redhead children, it's going to go to these black poll workers, however much it is. Now, of course, if he were living in Florida and maybe they've changed the law, or Texas, where they haven't changed the law, he could consolidate all of his assets into one piece of property and then shield everything. But I think his assets are in New York, and he can't, and that the state doesn't provide that protection as a homestead exemption. So they're going to be able to grab much of that of his $10 million estate. So I think he's gonna lose big time.
When OJ got that big wrongful death judgment against him, I don't know exactly how he did it, but he managed to move a substantial part of his estate to Florida for homestead protection, even after the judgment was entered. I don't
Yeah,
know
and I
quite.
know that Florida has changed its laws because back when I was a young lawyer, I was a young lawyer at a law firm called Finley, Cumber, Wagner, Heine, and Finley, Cumble, Wagner, Heine, Meyerson, Underberg, Finley, Cumble, Wagner, Heine, Underberg, Meyerson, Manley, and Casey. At the time, it was the largest United States law firm, and then they had all sorts of problems because of who Finley, Cumble was. I mean, Wagner was the mayor of New York, and Casey was the governor of New York. But in any event, they ran into some fraudulent issues. So they all packed up and moved to Florida, put all their assets into Florida, and none of their assets could be touched. So I think that Florida changed its laws, but I think Texas has not. So if you can buy like up to 10 acres as a homestead. And if you put all your assets in those 10 acres, and if you buy 10 acres in Houston, in downtown
No, no,
Houston
no, no,
to
no.
live.
There's a difference between. I know something about Texas homestead law, and there's a difference between urban property
Okay.
and rural property. You can actually have up to 200 acres rural property,
Oh, and have
farming
as a
property.
homestead. But
Yeah.
even that's still some mess you could do. But I didn't know that you could do it after you actually filed for bankruptcy. You can move it
Oh, I
over
don't
in
know
the
about
state.
filing bankruptcy. OJ never filed bankruptcy, did he?
Oh, I'm supposed to after the incident occurred. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But I do know that all of his pensions and stuff were excluded from being attached. But his other assets, yeah, I don't know. I wasn't involved in that.
Even though you were in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's right. He didn't ask me for help.
God, I wonder why. Anyhow, the the case in involving Trump is just it's so disturbing because which was speaking of where you are, you're in downtown LA, and so you're really just a stone's throw from South Central. Uh, and which was more of an insurrection, in your opinion, 1992 Los Angeles or January 6 in Washington?
Yeah. Well, is that you're talking about the Rodney King incident?
Yeah, the so-called LA uprising.
Yeah, certainly the LA uprising was a lot worse. We during that period of time, my wife and I never go to Catalina Island, but we were in Catalina Island at the time of the uprising, and we could look at it, and we had a I think we were in Zane Gray's house. Zane Grey used to go to Catalina to write his cowboy stories, and it's turned into a bed and breakfast, and we were
Zane
sitting
Grey
in
was one of my grandmother's favorite authors. She had a
and
this wide.
also Eisenhower's. But in it, we were sitting looking out our window in Zane Grey's house in Catalina Island, and it was like watching fireworks because they were just burning their own nest down. South Central was just in flames, and we could sit there. We could watch fires popping up all over the place, and it was quite a spectacular affair.
Well, now in terms of political action, yesterday Sam Dixon and I were talking about the limited realm of political action that people like us have to operate in. And it is very limited indeed. But, you know, has anyone, as a matter of equal protection of the laws, has anyone who was involved in the LA riots had their rights curtailed by virtue of being participants in an insurrection?
I don't know. I
I don't.
think that
I'm willing to bet it never even came up anywhere. A few people might have been arrested. But compared to what was going on, very few people were arrested in those riots.
well, I was there on January 6th, and it was just a very peaceful movement. People were going around in 1776 uniforms. You had a bunch of Filipino people going through handing out tracts on Jesus. You had people carrying Trump signs. It was just a camaraderie, and we walked over there. It was as peaceful as possibly could be. And then I got up close, and it was not it was nothing that they're making it out to be, at least where I was. I guess the Capitol has four sides to it, but our side was really peaceful. Everybody was pleasant. The only thing was is that they didn't have any toilets anywhere. I think they specifically moved the toilets, so it was really unpleasant. Um, and then I went up fairly close, and I think I mentioned this before. Everybody, I was in a bunch of Christians, and everybody said, "Oh," and someone says, "Let's get on our knees and pray for Donald Trump." And so everybody got on their knees to pray. And I thought, that's stupid. We don't need to pray. And right then, the cops shot tear gas, and I was the only one standing up around there, and I got tear gas right in the face. So I turned around and hightailed it out of there. I was really what is it called? A fair weather soldier, a summer soldier. As soon as I got tear gas in my eyes, I went in the back and I sat as far back as I could, and I watched the event from a distance.
Wow. That pamphlet, Tom Paine's The American Crisis, that was another historical event this week. That was published on December 19th of 1776.
I've read some of his stuff. It's dry. You read Patrick Henry's speech, and that is one of the best speeches out there.
Oh, it
And you
is.
read Thomas Paine stuff, and it's a pain to read. I tell you that.
Tom Paine later became basically part of the French Revolution.
Oh,
Uh,
really? So he was just a rabble rouser, I
yeah,
guess.
exactly.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that's really interesting. And no, I don't believe you've ever told me that you were tear gassed before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I was tear
that's
gassed,
I've never
and
experienced that.
yeah, it was, and it's unpleasant. Boy, I don't see how anybody. You occasionally watch these videos where people get pepper sprayed or tear gassed, and they just keep going. If they're just they just keep attacking and whatever. Boy, as soon as I got a whiff of that tear gas, I was done for the day. And I went back in the back there, and I was just acting as coughing and wiping my hands. I was taking the full advantage of all the sympathy I get from all the people. Because I thought it's kind of fun. People are sympathizing with me, but it was unpleasant, boy.
Wow, where did you stay up there? I mean, during that, were the regular hotels all crowded, or what was it like?
We stayed in New Jersey. No, not Jersey. We,
New
we stayed
Jersey, that's a
across
hell
the.
of a
No,
commute.
no, no, no. We crossed. What's across the river? We stayed across the.
Arlington?
What one of the. I don't know. We stayed across the river. All I know
In
that.
Virginia, in Arlington.
Is there any other? Yeah, probably in Arlington. Or did I go up to see? Was that when I was up to what is that guy's name? Jared Taylor. No, I think that was a different time. I we stayed in a hotel, and it was not a far away, and it wasn't crowded. We got it in, but I yeah, it was unremarkable. I can't remember.
Well, anyhow, it's just uh, when you compare January 6th with Los Angeles, January 1992, when you compare it with Los Angeles during, the
The
Watts
Watts
riots of the
rights. Yeah,
60s.
yeah.
I mean, it was a non-event. It was, like you said, I mean, it was basically a kind of outdoor political party.
One thing that's interesting to me is that, when I was in the 60s, you had all of this upheaval in Berkeley, California, Berkeley, and I was in Eugene, Oregon at the time, and there was a lot of upheaval and bombing in Eugene, Oregon also. And There were no arrests. You had S.I. Hayakawa climb on the top of a bus and pull down the speakers, the speakers from the counter protest from the protester speakers. But there was not mass arrests. I don't think they were allowed to do sit-ins. They were allowed to protest. And then I just heard that, like last week, protesters took over Brown University, and they protested the the
Gaza.
Israeli occupation of Gaza. And what happened? Brown arrested every single one of them and charged them with trespassing. So, the response is totally different. Why? Why would the response be different? I wonder, when the protesters were much larger and more violent at the University of Oregon campus and Cal State Berkeley than they were in Brown. I wonder, maybe it's because who was being attacked at that time? Attacking Israel gets you arrested and charged when you're just doing a sit-in.
Oh hell. We're in big trouble. We're in big trouble because yeah, Donald Trump is he's not even half the insurrectionist either you or I are. He just isn't.
No, no, but he is more mercurial, irresponsible, and vindictive than you and I will ever be. If he gets elected, he is going to be the madman that everybody on the left fears. I think he is going to clean house like no one's business. Because I mean, just take a look at when he ran the first time around. I mean, you had this Muslim, what is a Gold Star family that said, oh, my son died, and everyone was all sympathetic. He came out and attacked the Muslim family, and everybody said that's crazy, And when he gets up there, and when they start talking about Senator McCain being a hero, he gets up there. Senator McCain was a hero because he was captured. I don't like people who are captured. Everywhere he goes, he just attacks. He attacks. He attacks. If he gets elected again, and I think he will, we're going to see the Trumpian era times five.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Sam thinks he's going to be arrested. And what will happen if the president of the United States, if the people of the United States were to arrest someone who were to elect someone who was actually in jail?
Yeah,
Now that would require an insurrection, wouldn't it?
I haven't thought about that. I mean, he would be sworn in prison, and then he would pardon himself. But if he's in jail for state
In
reasons,
Georgia,
yeah, then he couldn't pardon himself. Uh, yeah, these are interesting times.
you'd have to
Uh,
have the reverse of the Leo Frank case. Instead of breaking into the Atlanta prison to hang him, they'd have to break into the Atlanta prison to let him
free him.
go to the White House.
Yeah. Who knows? This, just because life is long, eras come and go. For that very reason alone, it would be worth getting him elected to see what would happen, what would transpire if he's in a Georgia jail and he's elected to be president. That would be the coolest event I could think of.
Well, I mean, you there would have to be the funny thing is that the people who are punishing him for insurrection, they're setting it up where something like an armed insurrection is almost necessary.
Yeah, but we're too weak and placid to do that. I mean, it's not like during the French Revolution where people were starving. It's not like the German takeover in the 1930s where people were just devastated through inflation. The white people, in spite of all the anti-white bias and discrimination, white people are still doing pretty well for themselves. And you have in the American Revolution a lot of very powerful leaders giving up everything to fight for the cause. I don't see that among the white people today. So I don't know if there will be an insurrection. I think we might just be wringing our hands, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah. it's going to be an interesting year, and yeah, by this time next year, we will know how it all shook out.
I mean, the thing is, all right, first of all, who could it be except Trump? It cannot be. And if you look at the what is it called? Those betting programs where they estimate who's going to win the Super Bowl and all that kind of stuff. They have betting programs on who's going to become the president, and the percentages, Trump is has the best odds of becoming president. Second best odds is Biden, and then you have Gavin Newsom way down the list. So Trump is literally more likely, according to the odds makers, of becoming president than anybody else. I think if it's not Trump, it's going to be Newsom, Gavin Newsom, but I don't know.
Well, that would be horrible, because basically you'd have a person who has a brain in the but politics is bad or worse than Biden.
Yeah, yeah.
That would
Well,
not be an attractive scenario.
yeah, and also up there was that Kennedy guy, and he's an unknown quantity. He's got some good things and some bad things.
Well,
Oh,
he's supposedly running as a third party, but
yeah. Okay,
uh,
I'm gonna mute you. Just
we're almost done anyhow. But it is a very interesting winter solstice, is all I can say. And I think everybody should read all 213 pages of the Colorado Supreme Court's ruling.
how many pages?
213 pages.
Did you read it?
No, I think everyone should.
Yeah.
And then do a book report on it.
Okay.
Uh,
I'm gonna have to cut off early. I'm sorry. I got all
oh,
these
that's okay.
closing
But Alan Dershowitz said that he would give this a D minus in law school. Well, happy winter solstice to Bill Johnson. But no, the Colorado Supreme Court's ruling here in the Trump case is fascinating, not least for the fact that they admit that every allegation showing that Trump was an insurrectionist was in fact hearsay, and that the district court did not err in admitting portions of the January 6th report or anything else. And then their definition of insurrection. Dictionaries, both the old and new, the district court's order, and the briefing by the partisan amici curiae suggest several different definitions of the word insurrection. Noah Webster's dictionary from 1860 described it as arising against civil or political authority, the open and active opposition of a number of persons to the execution of law in a city or state. It is equivalent to sedition, except that sedition expresses a less extensive rising of citizens. It differs from rebellion, for the latter expresses a revolt or an attempt to overthrow the government, to establish a different one, or to place the country under another jurisdiction. And that is not what happened on January 6th. And what's a rising anyhow? Am I engaged in a constant rising against the government? Maybe I am. I don't know. Come and get me for insurrection. I double dog dare you. But anyhow, the winter solstice, we won't know till tomorrow whether the days are actually going to start getting longer again. But I think what's profound is that nobody knows how to move the political world. And it's almost as if the motions of the political world are as fixed in the stars as the rotation of the sun around the earth, the rotation of the moon around. Did I just say the rotation of the sun around the earth? I think I did. That's very, very 15th century of me, isn't it? Rotation of the Earth around the sun, um, rotation of the moon around the Earth. Uh, the rotation of the spheres is fixed. And one strange thing in reviewing history is it seems to me that there's kind of a sense of destiny in all this, and that whatever happens is almost programmed to happen. And maybe the most interesting thing about Donald Trump having been president and possibly being president again is that it's against the programming. It is not what the power elite wanted it to be. And I just can't understand how there is such widespread feeling that Donald Trump is different, because basically he's not, except as Bill emphasizes his personality. Politically, he's a liberal. He's very much as liberal as Lindsey Graham or Governor Kemp, or he's probably in some ways more liberal than Ron DeSantis. Ironically enough, I don't care for Ron DeSantis at all, especially in light of his policies relating to freedom of speech. He's, but you know, in terms of traditional conservative issues, he's arguably more conservative than Trump. And yet Trump, because of his personality, because of the force of his personality, he is the great white hope. And I guess that's as we approach what in New Orleans definitely will not be a white Christmas in any sense of the word. That is really where we are, is on Donald Trump is the only hope for Americans of any kind of traditional bent or set of values. And usually by this time there's music playing, and there was no music coming in. And so, unlike the arrival of the shortest day of the year, obviously the programming on this show has a lot left to human error. And I guess I'm grateful for that. If it lets me keep on talking, I'll start talking more about the 213 page opinion of the Supreme Court of Colorado. I read the definition of insurrection, and they go on for quite a few pages. Engaged in insurrection. I guess let's see. It looks like it's about. They conclude that President Trump engaged in insurrection. The Constitution leaves these terms undefined. Therefore, we must make a legal determination regarding what the drafters and ratifiers meant when they chose to deploy these words in Section 3. Mindful of the deferential standard of review afforded a district court's factual findings, we conclude that the district court did not clearly err in concluding that the events of January 6th constituted an insurrection, and that President Trump engaged in that insurrection. And something is wrong with Speak Free Radio, I guess. I'm still connected after my hour is up, and I guess I shouldn't complain about it, but I had planned to go do some other things this evening. And so I guess if it were any other night, I'd just keep talking, but it's the winter solstice, and I do have a few other things I've got to do. But I think that given a choice between believing that Donald Trump was an insurrectionist and believing in the Easter Bunny. I recommend Easter Bunny #1, Santa Claus #2. Donald Trump as an insurrectionist is just plainly preposterous. But even though it's Thursday, December 21st, the winter solstice, and even though they seem to be of a mind to let me keep on talking without my departure through the Flying Dutchman, I think I'm going to sign off tonight because I do have other things I've got to do, and we may as well stick to some kind of schedule here. If I had known, I would have planned for a two-hour segment this time, but I just didn't plan that, and I'll have to talk to the powers that be. Anyhow, I will be back tomorrow. I will probably broadcast on Christmas Day, as a matter of fact, and so I will be seeing you again. Good night, everybody. Happy winter solstice. Happy long. It is the longest. One day of the. One way of thinking about it is, it's the shortest day of the year, but it's also the longest night of the year.